This episode of the Downtown Rams podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is your daily fantasy platform for player props. Now, Thrive Fantasy is offering our listeners an instant match on their first deposit of at least $20. Use promo code DTSN when signing up today. Start picking your props, racking up points, and winning cash prizes.
Aaron Donald creates the fumble. Goff goes crashing into the end zone. It is intercepted by Jalen Ramsey. Robert Wood, touchdown, LA! Picked off by John Johnson. Caught, touchdown, Tyler Higbee. It's Michael Brockers who gets there. A'Shawn Robbins, Cooper Kupp plucks it out of the air. Taylor Rapp, who had one taken away, will take this into the end zone. Henderson with a good run and a first down, still on his feet. Safety in the arms of Leonard Floyd. Up top, touchdown, Van Jefferson. Terrell Lewis. Everett in stride. Wow!
Hit behind the line. Terrell Burgess, 26.
Bryson Hopkins at the goal line and in for his second touchdown. But Malcolm Brown into the end zone. Abu Khan with the strip sack. Picked off by Troy Hill.
Akers with a stiff arm. Akers into the end zone. Cam Akers.
LA will play for the Lombardi.
Welcome back, guys, to another Downtown Rams podcast. It's episode 318. I'm your host, Jake Ellenbogen. Joining me, as always, is Alexis Kraft, and our special guest, who's going to be our Washington football team expert this week. It is Matt Valdovinos. He is from the Pro Football Network. How's it going, Matt? Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It's been a while.
Yeah, well, we're excited to talk to you. And just to kick this off, I'm going to go over the injury report just really fast, starting with the Rams. The Rams are expected to have both rookie running back Cam Akers and safety Jordan Fuller back this week, which is huge news for the Rams because that was a big loss for us last game. But, McVay is going to monitor the next 2 days before possibly activating outside linebacker Terrell Lewis to the 53-man roster. So that's something else to look out for. But as far as who did not practice as of today, offensive lineman Bobby Evans was out with a shoulder injury. Linebacker Kenny Young had a knee injury. Linebacker Micah Kaiser is dealing with that groin and a pec injury. And then offensive tackle Andrew Whitworth and defensive lineman Aaron Donald, excuse me. I can't believe I did that.
Wow, that's awful for the brand.
Yeah. In my defense,
There wasn't Andrew Denall on the Rams years ago.
I was hearing myself and then it cut off and that threw me off. But to rephrase this, offensive tackle Andrew Whitworth and defensive lineman Aaron Donald did not practice today, but they were just rest days, so they are not injured. However, they were on the did not practice list. For the Washington football team, as far as who did not practice today, a lot of wide receivers, unfortunately dealing with injuries. Dontrell Inman, Terry McLaurin, and Steven Sims Jr. All did not practice today. Tight end Marcus Bow didn't practice today, but he was on the non-injury list. Offensive lineman, I will butcher this last name, Wes Schweitzer, I think.
Hey, nice. Yep.
There we go. Has a elbow injury, so he didn't practice. And then a big one for you guys, defensive end Chase Young is dealing with that groin injury. And then cornerback Greg Stroman has a foot injury. As far as limited participation, defensive tackle Jonathan Allen was on limited participation today. But then good news, full participation, linebacker Cole Holcomb was at full participation today. So that was the injury report. And now just I want to ask you, Matt, just going into week 5, what are your thoughts on the Washington football team, your team, where they are right now, and the course that you kind of think they're heading on for the end of the year?
Well, I mean, coming into the year, the expectation was that everyone recognized it as full rebuild year, that this was a year to evaluate the talent on the team. They weren't going to chase cheap wins, was kind of the motto. And they were going to see what they had to build a foundation for the future, right? That was a goal that Ron Rivera pushed, onto fans and analysts coming into the year. What I don't think they saw coming was that 4 weeks in, Washington would be half a game out of the NFC East, and that 7 games might actually win the division. So because of this, I think he's making a bit more drastic measures than he had originally anticipated coming into the year. We now know that Dwayne Haskins will be benched starting this week. We don't know if the expectation is he's going to come back this year. We don't know if he's, maybe never going to play another snap for the franchise. We really have no idea yet. There was some speculation that he would be traded based off what was happening in practice. He wasn't taking snaps during individuals. So there was a lot of, questions going around. But Kyle Allen will be starting, and I think the expectation is that Washington is going to win a couple games. I mean, after the Rams, they've got, I believe, 2 games against the Giants, a game against the Bengals, a game against the Lions, and a game against the Cowboys. So, I don't go into any of those games thinking, okay, Washington has absolutely no way of winning this game, and I think the coaches do too. So they want to get someone, Kyle Allen, who maybe is less likely to lose the team games just because he spent so much time in the system they're working with. But overall, a bit of a questionable decision. We'll see where it's going. I think it's kind of it's very strange to me that Rivera was so quick to change his mind on his view of the team and what this year meant. But I think right now their expectation is that they're going to go and try win the NFC East behind a very, very stout defense, a running game, and just getting the ball into the hands of playmakers and letting them make plays.
Yeah, it was definitely a bizarre decision in my opinion. Wasn't really expecting it. Obviously, I'm sure you weren't expecting it. I mean, you tweeted out Rams 50-0. So obviously you weren't expecting it, but now that they've made that move, it does seem kind of interesting. What I will say is this: when I look at this Washington football team, I see a team that really can compete with anyone because of their defense. And, I think that's kind of how I look at it. Like the trajectory the Rams and the Washington football team have, they're different, obviously. I do think the Rams are a potential Super Bowl contender. And I think with, Washington, they have a chance to win that really weak division. But they're different teams. They're on different paths right now. Washington's trying to build out their core, continue to build around what they have, especially grabbing a guy like Chase Young. So I mean, that'll be interesting, but all in all, I do think it does fall on their defense, and it pretty much allows them to compete. So if Kyle Allen can be that game manager per se, this team could end up being hard to beat when they have a defense that has, in my opinion, a top 5 secondary this year, the way they're playing. So that's just kind of my thoughts on that. But I do want to ask you if you foresee Antonio Gibson in this game. I'm a big fan of him. He was RB3 for me, grabbing hold of this backfield and, being the guy, or do you see them going with running back by committee, looking at J.D. McKissick and Peyton Barber?
Yeah, well, we saw the Capitol that, there were some, big fans of Gibson coming out. My co-host, Dalton Miller, being one of them, one of the huge ones. And even he wasn't expecting Gibson to be one of the first picks in the 3rd round, right? So Washington went out and invested, their second pick, because they didn't have their 2nd round pick this year. So their 2nd overall pick this year, and they went out to go get him. And so I thought it became obvious that they were going to try and feature him as best they could and just try and scheme as many touches as they could. But that was in originally a backfield that also had Darius Geis and Adrian Peterson. Neither of those players were on Washington's Week 1 roster. So I think it instantly becomes okay, we're going to warm Gibson up, but throughout the year, they're going to plan on giving him more and more touches. And I think this week, especially, is the week we're going to start to see, 15 to 20 carries on a weekly basis for Gibson, as opposed to the 8 to 13 he's been getting.
Yeah. And, what's interesting is, you have Gibson, and then on the Rams, we have Darrell Henderson, who is also from Memphis. So I'm curious just to ask in your opinion, because, Gibson is kind of one of those rising stars right now. Henderson is definitely a rising star right now, at least on the Rams. And the Rams kind of do also have that running back by committee going between Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers, and Malcolm Brown. But out of curiosity, I mean, who would you say has the better game this week? Do you think Darrell Henderson or Gibson has a better game?
With Cam Akers coming back, I'd probably say Gibson, just off of the he's the guy, right? I just expect him to get more touches. I also think that if you're comparing the, defensive competition, Washington's line, I mean, actually, the Los Angeles line has been a lot better against the run than I thought they were going to be this year. They've been excellent. The issue is with both Kenny Young and Micah Kaiser on the injury report. I'm not sure if they're going to play or not. I do think that favors into it. Whereas Washington's front seven, minus Matt and Ice, because I do expect Chase Young to come back this season or this week. The defensive line is loaded. It's ready to play again. It's been very good this year. One of the top units in the league, I think, in my opinion. So I do think that Gibson's touches versus maybe the competition level that they're going against. But that being said, I do love Darrell Henderson. For some of the people who don't know, I was very avid that he was my running back one coming out in 2019. I liked him over Josh Jacobs, which was not a popular opinion. But I was really, really hurt when Cam Akers got drafted because I thought it was going to be the year that Darrell Henderson was going to take over, be that featuring back. Maybe it gets to my horn a little bit, but he's been very good. I love Cam Akers a lot too. I don't like the fact that Malcolm Brown gets so many touches, but Sean McVay is probably a little smarter than I am.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Darrell Henderson was actually my number one running back in that draft over Josh Jacobs, and I know exactly what you're talking about. When I said that at the Senior Bowl, I got a lot of like, what? But yeah, I mean, I think both Gibson and Henderson, they come from Memphis, obviously, with Anthony Jones, who's doing a phenomenal job out there, and Kenneth Gainwell's right around the corner, so there'll be another guy. But moving into the wideouts, you have McLaurin, you have Sims, who I'm very familiar with being a KU fan, and Inman. If they're all unable to go, as they're all on the injury report, who would you expect to see in this game out wide? And could we see more of the 4th round pick Antonio Gandy Golden, regardless if the other three play or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely would. We saw some of AGG in this past game against the Ravens, and we saw him against the Browns a little bit. Had a nice jet sweep. I think he would be, for my profile, as that X receiver. And if all three of those are out, someone to watch is absolutely Isaiah Wright, the Temple product. He was an undrafted free agent, great athlete. He's the return guy now. He had a big coming out party against the Ravens where he had a strong game. So if all three of those receivers are out, I would say Isaiah Wright's probably the person to watch in the Washington offense, at least through the air. But Antonio Gandy Golden will be taking over the X position.
Yeah, and then, when I was reading the injury report earlier, Chase Young was on the did not practice list, but, a lot can happen between now and game time. How big of an impact does a potential Chase Young return have on this game? Because, he's obviously a really good player for your guys' defense.
Yeah, I mean, he was probably the best player on their defense prior to getting injured. He was ridiculous for a rookie. I think Aaron Donald is comfortably the best defense player I've ever seen, and I believe will retire as the best defensive player in NFL history. The only person in the NFL that I look at right now that I think has any possibility of coming close to matching the production that Aaron Donald had, I think would be Chase Young. I think that's why we talked about him so highly in the pre-draft. But one thing that you'll notice is even when Young and Matt Ioannidis, two of arguably the team's best linemen, both went out, there's not a huge drop in production because Washington has spent so many resources on that defensive front, right? You have Montez Sweat and Ryan Kerrigan right now, your starters, who, even if you don't draft Chase Young, we're going to be an above-average duo in the NFL on the edges anyways. And then you still have Jonathan Allen, you still have Deron Payne, who are both first-round picks on the interior. So I do think that, yes, obviously having a player like Chase Young is huge for any team. I think Washington's one of the few teams in the NFL that's built to take an injury like that and not lose much production. Now, if it was someone like we say, if Terry's missing, that's when you have a massive drop-off, going from Terry to a guy like Isaiah Wright. But going from a guy like Chase Young to Ryan Kerrigan, it's not that crazy of a drop-off where I think you go in and it feels like you've already lost because of it.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And, Chase Young is somebody I felt like instantly, he's a man-child. And, instantly I just noticed just the impact he made on this defense. And I already think this defense, like I said, I think they're very similar to last week when I was, talking up the Giants defense and how they could post fits for the Rams because, the Giants have the secondary and they had the interior. I feel like the Redskins kind of have it all. The linebackers are a little weaker than, say like a Colts defense, but they're up there among the best. And if they had a better offense, they wouldn't be on the field as much, which I think people seem to forget. So, kind of looking at this though, This is definitely an interesting game for the Rams. They're 3-1 here. Washington is 1-3. Both obviously need a win on Sunday. Going into this game, who is one Washington player you would highlight for Rams fans that are listening to this show to keep a close eye on Sunday?
Probably Kevin Pierre-Louis. He's Washington's middle linebacker. He's in coverage. He's been a little susceptible to the more athletic tight end, so I do think Tyler Higbee could have a strong game against him. But with all the motion, all of the jet sweeps, all of the action that guys like Brandon Cooks get in the backfield, moving east to west, I think that he's going to be huge. All the screens the Rams utilize, the Sean McVay offense, of getting the ball out of Jared Goff's hands quickly, give it to a playmaker, let them make a play. I think having a guy like that who's a legit 4'4", 4'5" athlete playing linebacker, you'll see him flying around a lot, especially towards the line of scrimmage. I think he's going to be what Washington tries to use to deter some of those jet sweeps and those handoffs to Robert Woods. So I think that's the one guy to watch out. Besides the obvious, maybe another guy would be like Jimmy Moreland, their slot corner. Very, very great run defending cornerback and reads screens as well as any cornerback on the team. So I think he would do a great job as well. Those are the guys who are going to be real important against that offense because, like I said, Sean McVay does such a great job opening up and putting the Rams playmakers in space. It's what makes him one of the best offensive minds in the NFL. And I think that's going to be huge.
Yeah, and just looking at the quarterbacks going into this game, we have Jared Goff and Kyle Allen. And Jared Goff, for the most part, has played really well this season. I mean, obviously last week against the Giants was not a game that, us Rams fans were super proud of. And, we didn't think that we played obviously as well as we could have, even though we did win the game. And, but other than that, I think most of us have been pretty pleased with the way Jared Goff's been playing. And then we have Kyle Allen, who hasn't played in a game yet this year. So I guess, I'll start with Matt. Who do you think is going to have the better game this week just based on matchup, Jared Goff or Kyle Allen?
I'm going to go, this might be a hot take. I'm going to take Jared Goff here. I think he's a much better quarterback on a much better offense, in a better scheme with a better coach. I think it would be a catastrophe if Jared Goff was outplayed by Kyle Allen. I really do. I think he's been good, right? I don't think he's at all been bad. I think he's been better than last year. I don't think he's as good as that 2017, 2018 stretch we saw where, there was consideration for him as like any elite quarterback in the NFL. But he's been good enough to win games, and it's really what they need. I think he's a tier up above the game manager. I think he's perfect for what Sean McVay wants to do. And I think that's what's so big. So I would expect Jared Goff to have a better game.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. I was saying before the podcast with Alexis, Rams fans will know this name. Kyle Allen reminds me of an Austin Davis in a sense, where he can be exciting, obviously around with what he had last year. He came into that offense and kind of gave them a spark. But at the same time, he had a hard time keeping the ball out of the other team's hands. I think really just point blank, that's what we need to talk about is ball security. And it's great if Kyle Allen could throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, but if he throws for 4 touchdowns and 4 picks or fumbles twice, it kind of negates everything you did. And so, Austin Davis ran into that issue in St. Louis when he would throw 3 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns and then fumble twice. Then everybody was on his case. So I feel like, Kyle Allen kind of is in this position where, we talked about this defense already. Really all he needs to do is just play a mistake-free football, not go too crazy with, the deep ball, although they probably will. And just try to play more of a game manager role. Whereas Jared Goff, I think they're just going to let him. I think they might have more of a Giants approach because they did, try to just dump it off and open things up because the Giants defense is really good in the secondary. But, against this Washington team, if Chase Young doesn't play, I think it's going to help big time. If he plays, they might have to try and do some things they may not want to prefer to do, but I do think Jared Goff at the end of the game is going to have the better game for sure. Kind of looking at this though on the backfields, we talked about, obviously you mentioned Antonio Gibson. You could see this game being a 15 to 20 carry game. But I do want to, I want to point out that since Cam Akers, as Alexis explained earlier, will be back, basically there are two backfields here. They may not be fully running back by committee, but there are three guys in each, in each situation, each scenario that are going to grab carries in this game. How do you see both sides of those going? We'll start with you, Matt.
Yeah, well, I think I do agree that each team has three running backs that are going to see carries. I think in Los Angeles, you're going to get a closer ratio for each one. Like you might get 12 from Henderson, 10 from Akers, and 8 from Brown, right? Something like that. Whereas I think in Washington, you would get closer to like 15 Gibson, 9 McKissick, and then like 4 to 5 on Barber. So just Peyton Barber really is only used. I mean, he was used to eat some of the clock in week 1 against Philadelphia, but the rest of the season, he's pretty much exclusively been like a 3rd and 1, a 4th and 1, a goal line kind of guy. Because he's bigger, he's a little more compact, he's a little tougher to take down. But I do think if we're seeing, anything outside of those, it'll be a heavy dose of Gibson and McKissick. And then with the Rams, I think it's just whoever the hot hand is. I mean, that's what it seemed like so far. If Darrell Henderson's the one eating, he's going to get a majority of the touches. If it's Cam Akers, if it's Malcolm Brown, they'll get it. But that's how I see them matching up.
Yeah, I typically agree. I think with Washington, Gibson is definitely, I think, going to lead the team in carries. I think that he's kind of like the star a little bit right now for the backfield, just based on kind of what I've heard and seen. And I do think with the Rams, it is kind of like probably a pretty even split between the three running backs. I will say I won't be surprised, though, if the Rams do limit Akers a little bit. Just because of the injury and just trying to be extra cautious and not overdoing it, and maybe, giving him slightly less carries than they typically would to try and kind of ease him back into the game. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Henderson and Brown have more carries than Akers. But I do think that relatively they probably all will be in rotation and in that running back by committee scheme. But I do have a question for you, Matt. As far as the biggest breakout offensive player on each team, kind of your opinion on that. Who is someone for Washington and someone for the Rams that you think could potentially have a big game this week on the offensive side of the ball?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if we do see Steven Sims injured and he not play this game, like I said, I think Isaiah Wright would be the big guy to watch. Someone that they're just going to try and put their hands, get the ball in his hands and let him make a play, let him go down the field. He's got great athletic ability. He's phenomenal with the ball in his hands. So I think that's what we would see. For the Rams, I'm going to say Van Jefferson, because Washington secondary has been good, but they're susceptible to the deep ball, specifically on double moves. And I think Van Jefferson is, phenomenal. That's where he's going to eat on the outside. He's going to make a play. Might not be as good an athlete as the Washington cornerbacks are, but if he gets a one-on-one with Ronald Darby on the sideline, I do think Van's going to find a way to get open down, and knowing Washington, Jared Goff will find him.
Yeah, I think those would be my two. So I've been looking at Isaiah Wright, almost picked him up in Dynasty. I really like the way he played against Baltimore. And I really do like Antonio Gandy-Golden, so I could see that. I think with Golden's physical ability, I think he could be an issue. If he gets matched up with, say Troy Hill, if he ends up playing and gets matched up with Troy Hill, I think he would be the breakout offensive player I would go with. And then for the Rams, it's time for Van Jefferson to have that game. It's been time for a while. The last two games he's been shut out without a catch. So I'd imagine this is the game where, McVay already said this week that he wants to get him more involved in the offense after being decently involved the first two games. I think this is the game, where he does. But moving on, the offensive line, who's going to end up being the better offensive line in this game? The Rams offensive line that has surprised some people, or the Washington football team's offensive line that has Wes Schweitzer, I think that's his name. He's on the injury report. So, maybe he doesn't play, but which one do you see being better?
I think Los Angeles is going to be better. I do think that the biggest issue is that Washington is starting a guard named Wes Martin, who has not been very good this year. And Aaron Donald is the best player in football. So not a matchup that I'm looking forward to. But I do think that Washington has, especially if Chase Young can come back, I do think that those edge rushers have an advantage over Los Angeles' tackles, even though I do think the offensive line has been much better. I think the trio of Sweat, Young, and Kerrigan do overall. I would expect to have some production and some level of making Jared Goff uncomfortable. But overall, I would expect the Rams' offensive line to be better, especially in the run game.
Yeah, I would probably agree. I do think that the Rams' offensive line has been pretty good this season so far, so I do expect them to have a good game. But looking now at the defense, who do you think just overall would have a better game, the Rams' defense or Washington's defense? Because
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, the Rams defense has been relatively inconsistent. I think they've done some things well. They've done some things not well. I mean, depending on which Rams fan you ask, they have, differing opinions on that. But just from a Washington fan's perspective, looking at the Rams defense and then looking at your team's defense, who do you think probably has the better game?
I think if we're going like relative to expectations, so it's hard to answer questions like these just because I think any defense playing Washington's offense is probably going to have the better day. I do think Washington's defense has been quietly one of the 5 to 6 best units in football. It's just that they struggle with points given up off turnovers because Washington's offense turns it over the third highest clip in the NFL. And they're not just, turning over the ball, in the opponent's red zone. It's turning over the ball at your own 40-yard line. And so that's really affected the Washington. If Washington's offense can do a good job of holding onto the ball and eating some clock, getting the ball underneath, trying to expose the linebackers of the Rams, maybe trying to get after some of the, edge rushers, maybe Kyle Allen can make a play or two with his legs. I think that Washington's defense theoretically would have a better day overall, but it's very volatile. I think with the Rams secondary being so good and Kyle Allen playing quarterback that, Los Angeles has a very good chance of potentially having 4 interceptions in the game, or if Kyle Allen's smart with the ball, I think Washington's defense is overall going to have a stronger day.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you. And I think, Washington has the potential to do what the Giants did. If the Rams let them, and keep in mind, this is the third week out of 4 of the last 4 that they've traveled the East Coast. So, Washington has an opportunity here. The Rams are coming off a tough win where they did not play their best football. The Giants were there at the end. I feel like, again, Washington's built pretty similar to what the Giants are right now. So, I would say that if the Rams don't watch it and, the Washington football team doesn't turn the ball over, they can stay there until the end and, create havoc. But, I think that's kind of where I stand. I think I'm going to say that the Rams defense has a better game, mainly because I think that obviously Sean McVay is going to game plan around this defense. He knows this defense well. He knew the Giants defense very well. I would imagine he's going to game plan around this defense. Even if they go conservative, I think he'll have a good approach bouncing back from last week. But I really think, guys like Darius Williams are going to be a problem for Kyle Allen. The Rams do a really nice job of, basically disguising their coverages. You have guys off the edge that, finally broke out last week. So we will see. Plus Terrell Lewis could play. I think that would be a huge help for this defense. I do think the Rams are going to force Kyle Allen into having not so great of a debut for, Washington. But I do want to ask Alexis who she thinks is going to have a better game of the 2 defenses.
I'm inclined to say the Rams for this game. I know that I've had my issues with the Rams defense this season, especially when it comes to our run defense, because we've been super, inconsistent and we've just not done a good job against the run, in my opinion. But I do think kind of with the depleted Washington offense potentially, in a new quarterback in for Washington. I do think the Rams might have a pretty good day on defense, especially when we talk about the offensive line going against Aaron Donald. I think he might have a good game as well. So it's really up in the air for me, but I'm inclined to lean towards the Rams.
Yeah, and then looking at the defense, what are some key matchups? We'll start with you, Matt. Key matchups in this game that you're highlighting.
I mean, the big one to me is going to be Jalen Ramsey and Terry McLaurin. Jalen Ramsey played in the slot against the Giants a lot more than I thought he would. So that would lead me to believe that there's a good chance he's going to follow McLaurin regardless on where he goes, because McLaurin will line up everywhere on the offense. I think it's going to make life tough. They're still going to try and force feed McLaurin the ball. They're going to try and give him his targets. So I think that's going to be huge. He's been the best receiver in the NFL after the catch, but Jalen Ramsey is widely considered one of the best tackling cornerbacks in the NFL. So I think it's going to be huge to see how that goes. And then I think it's just the Rams pass rush versus the Washington pass rush. Who gets after the quarterback? Who's going to do a better job? I think that's going to be the big thing. I just need to see the rest of the Rams defensive line step up. I think Aaron Donald is obviously going to consistently be that force. I would like to see Leonard Floyd be a little more productive. I'd like to see Terrell Lewis come back. That would be awesome because I was very high on him coming out of Alabama. I think that upside is huge. Even maybe get some snaps to Ja'Kai Polite. So I think there's a lot of interesting variants for what the Rams are going to do. But I think it's going to come down to which pass rush has the better day.
Yeah, I think one of the key matchups that I'm excited to see as well is just Jalen Ramsey on any receiver this week. I feel like he is going to have a good game, and then also Aaron Donald, especially with the offensive line. I think he's probably going to have a good game. I mean, I do think Aaron Donald was almost always double teamed. I don't think this game is going to be any different. So there is always a chance that he is somewhat contained. I feel like though he's going to make it happen somehow, some way, just because he is Aaron Donald, and you can't ever really count him out. But as far as biggest breakout defensive player on each team, and we all kind of might have touched on this a little bit earlier, but Matt, is there any one specific defensive player that you see having a better game than they have so far this season against the Rams?
The best game they had, because Kevin Pierre-Louis, who I talked about earlier, had a phenomenal game against the Cardinals, so I think it'll be hard to match that. Maybe Jonathan Allen. He's been a guy who's been applying a lot of pressure lately, over the first 4 weeks, but he hasn't been getting home. He's been missing just barely. He's been in the quarterback's face, but he hasn't been able to register a sack yet. I think he had half of one against Philadelphia. I think he's a guy to look for to maybe finally start getting home. Maybe a sack, maybe two would be huge. I think Washington's like third in the NFL in sacks right now, so I think him coming online as a pass rusher would help a lot as well.
Yeah, I definitely hear you there. Kind of looking at defensive breakout players, I think you mentioned him, Ja'Kai Polite. I think he could break out for the Rams. They give him the opportunity. He saw his snaps go up a whopping 5 snaps last week, 1-6. So we're moving up there. But I just think, when he's in there, obviously it's a smaller sample size, but when I watch Ja'Kai Polite, I think he has more of a pass rush plan than any edge defender on the Rams. I feel like he knows what he's trying to do. He's trying to obviously use his speed when he needs to, but he has a counter, he has a spin move. I feel like there's too many guys on this unit that just try to bull rush, and if it's not there, they just kind of give up, or not really give up, but just continue trying to push through. I saw Polite, being more versatile, in his limited snaps, and had a really nice pressure week 1. Late in the game against Dak Prescott, they would have had a sack if not for 2 holds on his helmet and his jersey. But I think he'll be the breakout guy for the Rams on defense. And with the Washington football team, I mean, I really like the way Jimmy Moreland's been playing. I don't think he gets enough credit. I could see Jimmy Moreland, taken a Goff interception to the house. Not trying to, throw shade at Goff, but I could see him getting, hit while he's throwing, and Moreland steps into, the throw and, takes it back to the house and does a nice job, shutting down one of the receivers. I could see that. I think Moreland's played some really good football. He's a 7th round pick last year. I think that's definitely a name to look out for. But moving on, we have our stat predictions. Is there anything, Matt, that you'd like to throw out there and call before it happens?
Yes, we'll say Washington registers 5 sacks this week.
Wow.
I think that would tie for second most in a game this year for them.
So my stat prediction is I think that Malcolm Brown, Darrell Henderson, and Cam Akers are each going to get at least 1 touchdown.
Wow.
So we'll see. I was inclined to make like Aaron Donald gets 2 sacks, but like I feel like I always make Aaron Donald stat predictions, so I'm like just trying to spice it up. But
gotta support.
Yeah, obviously, like he's the best. But Jake, what is your stat prediction before we get into final score predictions?
Yeah, so I'm not going to make any wild ones like last week when I said Jared Goff would throw 6 touchdowns like a moron, but they're just not even that offense, so I don't even know why I said that. I don't know. Looking at this, I kind of feel like we're leaning towards a breakout Van Jefferson game. It just seems like what Matt was highlighting, and now I know what he means. They are susceptible to the deep ball, and the way the Rams have used Van Jefferson, surprisingly, they haven't used him a whole lot, over the middle, being that reliable 3rd down receiver. They've been using him as the deep threat. Ironically, the thing that every Rams fan said that he lacked, speed over the top, even though he was the fastest guy at the Senior Bowl. Like I've said, I'm not even going to tell you how many times I've said that, but he's been the deep threat. And I think, Goff missed him last week. Like I've said, he was held the last 2 weeks without a catch. I think this makes sense. McVay's talking about him. I'm going to say, Van Jefferson coming out party will go 125 plus yards and 2 touchdowns for Van Jefferson in this one.
Certainly could happen. I mean, I believe that he was my breakout player that I predicted last week against the Giants, even though that game just kind of didn't go the way any of us thought it was going to go. I really hope that Van Jefferson, has a breakout game. I think he easily could, because I think that he's super talented and hasn't been showcased enough. So I could see that happening. But as far as final score predictions go, Matt, what is your final score prediction for this Rams versus Washington football team game?
I'm going to take the Rams 31-13 for Washington.
That is very close to mine.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I thought you were going to say mine. I'm going 31-17. I think the Rams, they'll win and they'll look good doing it towards the end. They're a really good second half team. This year they've outscored their opponents 59-23 in the second half. But I do think the Washington football team with that defense, I think that they'll, make it a little tougher on the Rams. But the thing I'm interested in, the three of the four first games by the Rams, they've scored on the first opening drive. So I'm interested to see if they do that, set the tone early on, or Washington gives them hell. But I have 31-17 Rams.
I have 31-10 Rams. So we all have super similar predictions. So we'll see how it goes. But nothing would surprise me. I mean, it's definitely not going to surprise me if Washington scores more or the Rams score less. But I do think it's going to kind of be. I think that the Rams are going to win pretty easily, and I know I said that last week against the Giants too. So you never know. But I do think that the Rams will win this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not, guaranteed. It's any given Sunday. We learned that the hard way last week. A lot of Rams fans, again, this isn't the AP 25 where like Alabama has to win by 52 in order to move up in the rankings. Like it's about winning games in the NFL, and I think regardless, I think the Rams fans last week learned that lesson. Regardless how it goes this week against Washington, you should just be happy as long as the Rams come away with the W. Of course, not you, Matt. Not saying you should, but well, I guess it depends.
Well, you never know.
Yeah, like where are we at on that? Like, so, but that's gonna do it for us. Matt, I'll give you the floor if you want to, shout out all the awesome things that you're doing. Throw any shameless plugs in there for our audience.
Well, I mean, as always, I would love for everyone to give me a follow on Twitter at MVScouting. Just be worried if you do say something dumb and I see it, and it turns out that what you said is not accurate, I will tell everyone. But, otherwise, let's have conversations. I love talking about the Rams. I love Los Angeles. I love Sean McVay. I miss him very much. Go check out my writing at Pro Football Network. I write about the draft. I've got a mock draft coming out this weekend, so that's exciting. And it's 3 rounds, so the Rams will have selections.
There you go.
So, go check that out. And then we also produce rookie rankings every week. Jordan Fuller has made it a couple times, so check those out as well. But that's all I got.
Well, your podcast, right?
Well, actually, we've been having trouble with the podcast, so that's not up right now. But when if you follow me on Twitter, when it comes back up, we will be posting again.
Gotcha. Well, just wanted to look out for it. I know you mentioned your co-host Dalton's been on. He was our honorary guest during the Dallas week. Now you're our guest, so we had some fun, man. Glad to have you on, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed. For Jake Ellenbogen, Alexis Kraft, and Matt Valdovinos, we are signing off until next time. And you guys enjoy this game this week. Go Rams.